the perfect rib in 3 hours? Some say it can't be done. I'm going to show you how to make juicy, mouth-watering ribs in 3 hours. Yes, 3 hours. No more 3, 2, 1 garbage that takes 6 hours. This is half the time and just as good, if not better. Let's get into it. First thing we need to do is pick out some ribs. We're here at Wally World, aka Walmart, and I want to show you 2 examples. So, when you're looking at ribs, you want to try and get some that are, let me show you. So, the thickness on them is pretty even throughout. The ends here are always a little bit thinner, but you don't want one that's like, let me show you this one. You don't want one that's like super thick on one side and then really thin on the other. Just it won't cook as evenly. And then another thing we're looking for is some good marbling, so seeing the fat kind of throughout. Get in on that. Okay. The other thing is on the back, you can see on this one, the rib here, the bone is like only half of the actual rib. Okay. And then on this one, it's about, 3/4 or more. So it's just a better part of the rib, because I'll show you here. You can see, so coming on this is spare rib meat along here. See how the muscle fibers are different? And if we compare to this rib we picked out, you don't get that at all. Because a St. Louis rib is what we're cooking. St. Louis style pork spare ribs is a spare rib that's been cut down. So this one has been cut down better than this one. So I would not get this one. If it's the only thing you have, it's fine. But if you have a choice, I would go for this one. Better ribs, better marbling, no excess spare rib meat. That's a little bit tougher. It's not as good. I'll tell you that. It's not as good. I've shown you how to pick out a good rib. Now I'm going to show you what you need to do before you put it on the smoker or in your oven. You got both options. So let's go ahead and take this plastic off. And real quick note, I like to put it on a cookie sheet because it catches a lot of these juices, makes it easier for cleanup. Okay, now we're going to trim it down a bit. So there's this part here you can see that needs to come off because it's not very good and it messes up with the thickness of the rib. Then usually this end part here, I'll try and find the last rib, the bone, come out from there and just trim this part off. You can still put this on the smoker or oven and eat it later. And then just going to go through and get rid of some of the excess fat. Check both sides. You can really see the marbling on this one's really good. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is take off this membrane. You don't have to take it off. I prefer it. I don't like the texture of it when it cooks. So what you can do is take a butter knife, go in one rib further. So here's the first rib, go in one more. And get your butter knife in there and start just kind of pulling it up. Okay, and once you got a good amount, paper towel, and just pull it off. Just work it off. That's the membrane. Got a little bit left. There we go. Okay. We've got our rib ready to go. Let's season it. I prefer to not buy seasonings with salt in them because you can't really control how salty you like it. With some of them, you're not gonna get like that extra flavor you want without the extra salt. So I like to use kosher salt, sprinkle on, you know, a good amount. It's always better to shy on the side of less salt, because too salty and you're gonna ruin it. The reason for kosher salt is it's a bigger grain salt. Imagine a driveway with ice on it and you pour salt on it. If you pour table salt on it, it's not gonna penetrate very far before it's dissolved. Whereas a coarse salt will penetrate into the ice further before it's completely dissolved. It's the same thing with meat. It's gonna make its way deep into the meat and season it. So if you use table salt, it's not gonna get very deep into the meat. So now, let's season the other side. I've got a seasoning that I made that I like. I'll put it in the description below. But we're just gonna go ahead and, I like to start on the bone side first. And just do a nice even coat. Some people like to put mustard on here or other stuff. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with it. I find that just adding the seasoning to the meat sticks pretty well. Okay, other side. And if you lay it down a little too thick, you can kind of spread it out. Because we want a good amount of seasoning, but not too much. That's about what we're looking for. So now, if you're gonna do it in your oven, turn your oven on 300 degrees. If you're gonna do it on your smoker, put it on 300 degrees as well. If you have a pellet grill like we're gonna cook on today, I like to put the ribs in first and then turn it on. It gives it a smokier flavor. I find pellet grills don't get smoky enough for my liking. I have other smokers that I would let them, like a charcoal smoker, I'd let it get up to temp and then put it in, or else it gets some bad smoke. So let's go through it on the smoker. Okay, we've got our smoker getting up to temp, 300 degrees. Get the ribs, throw them on. What we'll do is come back maybe in 10-15 minutes and spritz it with a little water. If you want to have extra smoky flavor, that'll help the smoke adhere to the meat. Cold water helps it adhere. You can add vinegar too, because vinegar's evaporation point's higher, so it'll actually stay on longer. So I do a mix of water and vinegar and spray it on if you want that extra smoky flavor. No. Okay, so let's go in. It's gotten dry enough here. We can go in and hit it up with just a little bit of water. Don't do so much that the rub starts running off. Just do enough to get it wet. You can do that every 10 minutes or so, depending how smoky you want it. Okay, so it's been 45 minutes. We're gonna flip the ribs over. Let's go ahead and flip. Getting some nice coloring on the bottom. So now, we're gonna set our timers for 45 minutes again. Don't need to show all that. And let it go. Okay, our 45-minute timer is up. So let's check on them. Ooh, it's looking good. We've got some great color here. Let's flip them over. Okay, and we got some good color here. We're gonna do the bark test like we did earlier, okay? Scratch. There's oil, but you don't see seasoning stuck in my fingernail. You can kind of feel it, like see how the bark is set there and set throughout? That's when you know you're ready. So we're gonna go and wrap this baby up and tuck it in for a nap. So, venture with me here. Come on this journey with me to the foil. We wanna go bone up. The reason why we want bone up is these things are sharp and they'll cut right through the foil. So bone up. I like to add some kind of liquid to help it braise. You can do, I've done soda. This is just barbecue sauce with water. So this is just enough liquid to get in there to help it braise. Now, go ahead and foil it up. And we're gonna put it back on the smoker or your oven for an hour. Our 1 hour is up. Let's check on these ribs. So, come in and get a look at that. They're looking good. We're getting some pull away from the bone. I like to check them with a temperature probe, not for temperature, but for softness. If you don't have one of these, a toothpick will work just as well. What you're looking for is a bunch of smoke. You can also use a toothpick. We're just gonna go in different spots to make sure it's nice and soft, like butter. We are ready. So here's what we're gonna do now, okay? We're going to flip them. Okay, so come take a look at these, okay? Looking good, looking good. Now, okay, so we're on the home stretch. Our ribs are pretty much done. If you don't want to sauce them, you could pull these off right now, 2.5 hours into this thing, and eat them, and they'd be perfect. I like to add some sauce though, so do a nice thin layer of sauce. We don't want to get too saucy. We don't want to get too saucy. And just go ahead and brush it on, like so. We're gonna leave these here, still at 300 degrees, for a half hour, and then they'll be done. Our ribs are ready to go. Bring out a cookie sheet or something else to put them on. We don't wanna just grab them with tongs because they'll probably fall apart on our way to the kitchen. So just be very careful when transporting them. Because we don't want this falling apart. We work so hard. Let's take these inside and cut them up. Look at these ribs. I bet you're wishing right now they could pop through the screen and come into your hands. Well, you're now one step closer. I'm gonna show you guys a tip that we like to do for cutting our ribs. If you have a spray bottle of water, just do a little on top. Get a cutting board, do a little there too. And that's going to help prevent it from sticking and pulling off all that great sauce when you flip it upside down. You might be wondering, dude, why are we flipping it upside down? I'll show you. As you can see with the bones, they go up and down and then slowly start to kind of veer off. And when we have them flipped bone side down, it's hard to see where the bones are and cut them, you know, kind of equally. So I like to have them like this because I can look between the bones and just cut through between the bones and try to keep them as, you know, normal looking as possible. But this is a much easier way to cut up your ribs. Because what's happened to me is I'll be cutting and I hit a bone and then it just breaks apart and it's just not good. Let's try a bite. We've got our ribs all cut up. Let's go in for a bite. Just a little look at what this rib looks like. Delicious. Now, let's try it out. I call that the perfect bite.